It disturbs me the number of comments I see in these circumcision support groups where it's like, well, it's okay to permanently sever ties with your family over this. Why would they do that? Okay, again, culture matters, and people do the best with what they can do at the time that they have it. And my parents, who had 2 disabled children, are the perfect example of that.
We are back with Jason's final part 2 interview. If you missed part 1, you can go back and watch that before this one if you want.
What inspired you to want to speak out against the practice publicly?
Yeah, I would say I have my doctor to thank for that, KJ. And the reason why I say that is because it was not until I was 9 years old that I actually met a great pediatrician who, because he's great, I'll say his name. His name is Dr. Jim DeFort. And Jim DeFort took me on as my pediatrician from when I was 9 and I stopped seeing him when I was 17. And throughout that whole time, I remember asking him one time, I said, can I get your opinion on this, or do you think it was necessary? And I remember him saying, unless it's actually medically necessary, I don't do them. And that was all he ever said about it.
Right, so he didn't actually have much to say.
He didn't have, no, and you may be able to tell by his name, he's also French-Canadian as well. I mean, his family doesn't, when you're from a culture that doesn't practice that on any sort of routine basis, even for a medical student like him to come to the United States and have the hogwash shoved in your face 24/7 about how bad it is. I don't know if Jim DeFort himself ever was circumcised or not. I don't need to know that information. But you know what I mean? Like, he was obviously either uncut himself or he was cut but knew better. It was very refreshing to have a doctor be able to say, you know what, unless it's medically necessary, I don't do nothing. Because that was such a far cry from what I experienced with my first pediatrician.
Right, which was the exact opposite, wasn't it?
Exactly, yep.
So now that you've started the journey, you had mentioned that you've been doing this for about 10 years now. What have you done within that time, aside from confronting the doctor?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to say that throughout my life, I've saved 3 males, like newborn males, from undergoing it. And I would say I've also done a lot of education with the intersex matter, because even though I'm not intersex myself, like I said, what Doug told me that day absolutely made my blood boil. And I was like, Doug, you mean to tell me that, like, I said, are you mad about this? And Doug's response was just, well, I can be upset all I want, but what good is that going to do me? And I've lived my whole life as a man. I can't start over now. Doug was like in his early 60s when I met Doug. So that's what I would say I've done more. You know, I can leave a lot of the other, you know, again, the anti-circumcision stuff. If the rest of the crowd wants to go ahead and do that stuff, great, because there's 50 other people waiting in line to go ahead and do that. But like I said, to be able to go ahead and not only push against this on the very personal level that I did, but also to be able to tie it up with female genital cutting and what happens to intersex kids, that's the secondary part that not a lot of intactivists can do.
Do you think that the intersex awareness movement is making better headway than the intactivist movement, or about the same?
Actually, I think less, because this is not to be meant political. This is just an observation. They're allowing the trans lobby to speak for them. Trans individuals, while I have nothing against them, have entirely different set of medical needs and services that they have to have versus people that are naturally intersex. So if there's anything else I could say about the intersex portion of this, it is that for God's sake, they should really be speaking up. Because did you know it's as common to be as intersex as somebody to have red hair?
Yes, I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's more than you might think.
You've probably met intersex people, just would have never known.
And I never knew. Doug was the first person I ever met who was open about it.
Do you believe that activism should be like protesting, or should it be more like done in the courtrooms?
Interesting question. And you know what? That's particularly poignant because the Bloodstained Men made a visit to my state just a few days ago for an OBGYN medical conference, and they were protesting there. And I think it depends on exactly what you want to have accomplished. I mean, I think meaning us as a movement, right? I think we need to determine, are we going to legally pursue these abusers who are posing as doctors? Or are we going to put all our faith and trust in regenerative medicine and help people who are afflicted by this get the help that they need to be able to create a biological replication of what was taken from them? Because guess what? This is a small movement. We don't have the resources at this time to do both.
So what you're saying is we really should be picking one or the other, huh?
I'm fine with either one, but we need to make that determination, because this sitting and hoping that Foragen eventually comes through, and this sitting and hoping that someone someday will eventually be able to bring a court case about this where the rest of the states will fall like dominoes, that I'm not saying they can't happen, but to sit here and wait idly by while we continue to have children literally being raped with knives moments after they're born is unacceptable.
Have you heard of the new court case that Intact Global has brought against the state of Oregon?
I have. I knew that it was being planned. Can I ask, did it actually get put through, or what? Where is its status right now?
As far as I know, there was a press release that Eric Klopper had done, and he had announced that it is in effect and it is starting. The state of Oregon is being sued.
I think that it's possible they could be successful, but here's what I'm going to strongly think of and pose a question before a judicial activist or attorney or judge or whatever says it down the road. Are we talking about all protection in terms of medical operations, or are we talking about protection from religious services?
To be completely fair, Intact Global, their initiative in suing Oregon is exclusively about the medical issue. Intact Global has taken a stance that they're distancing themselves from religious circumcision. And I believe that the idea is that essentially they have to take baby steps and move the ball forward. And if they were to try to attack religious circumcision at the same time as medical, that they're more likely to fail, because that's ultimately what the San Francisco bill was. It was trying to ban all circumcision, both religious and medical. And it was most likely struck down because they wanted the religious exemption to remain in effect.
I see. Okay.
So, I mean, personally, I still support Intact Global in ending medical circumcision, only because I know that the reduction of circumcisions is ultimately a win in the long run. And I believe that if we were to change the culture a little bit, which would be to reduce the circumcision rates, and in turn, the new generation would be majority intact, then I believe that in turn, religious circumcision wouldn't be able to be as strong of an argument.
I agree. And part of the reason too is because I was doing, reading up on this. Well, here's the thing. Part of the reason that to the best of my knowledge, that female genital mutilation law also was struck down was because, again, not only did they say there's really no way to enforce it evenly across all 50 states, but they also said there's absolutely no exception or differentiation in the law for what constitutes medical treatment versus cultural or religious application. So again, I'm sorry to say, as much as I despise the practice, the people who introduced the bill basically shot themselves in the foot because they did not delineate an exact definition of what constitutes mutilation. Because what constitutes mutilation in the religious sense is not the same thing as what it means in the medical sense.
That's a good point, yeah.
And not a lot of people know that, but that's the truth.
Right, because of the religious sense, they probably wouldn't even identify it as mutilation, while in a medical sense, it's very clear if you're removing healthy tissue for no reason whatsoever, that's a blatant mutilation.
Exactly.
Anything else that you would think that the movement would do better to actually focus on? Because right now, culturally, we don't really have the numbers. As you can see with the Bloodstained Men, whenever they protest, at most they get 20 people to come with them. While other movements and other protests, they're pulling in hundreds of people. It's a real cultural, it's hard to ignore when there's a lot of people behind it. While unfortunately the Intactivist movement really has sparse numbers that are actually standing up. What do you think would be a good way to get people, the general public, more on board with our position that circumcision is inherently wrong to force on people?
I think what we need to say is, when we were talking about, and I mean no disrespect when I say this is basic human nature and how humans think. Okay. Part of the very, very early Intactivists, right, that if you look back from like the 70s and the 80s, they were not your average Joe next door type people, right? They were artisans, they were bohemians, they were people who they made their whole persona going against the grain. I'm talking to you here in a nice, nicely dressed t-shirt in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood, and I have this level of passion about the topic that I do. Again, not by choice, but because it was inflicted upon me, I have to deal with it. So what I think the best thing that we can do is the movement is to start saying, you know what, if you want to be an Intactivist, you don't have to be the bohemian Andy Warhol person that is also hates everything about the medical industry. what I think we need to do is we need to start saying, you know what, there are more everyday Joe six-pack type people who are on board with this movement, because as soon as somebody else knows that oh, I know Fred, and Fred is a nice normal person and he's really against circumcision, well, I guess I don't have an excuse to not be anti-circumcision either, or someone I know can't be anti-circumcision either. It's about, is it a little bit persuading to people's inherent racism and middle class fears? Absolutely, but that's what started this practice in the first place.
What organization currently do you think is making the best success when it comes to the movement?
To be honest with you, I don't really follow them that much, because I mean, the only one I follow is Fortune, because I think that they deserve, if nothing else, they deserve some credit and public attention for being the very first people to have introduced the concept of regenerative medicine to this particular area of the body, right? So I will give them credit for that. But to answer, I'm afraid I can't really answer the question, because I'm not somebody that's like, oh, I'm scrolling through all these different organizations to see what they're up to on a weekly basis.
Right. That's totally understandable. Did you know that Eric Klopper, who was once the spokesperson for Forgen, he's actually the one who had founded Intact Global, and he's actually the one who's behind suing the state of Oregon.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew he was behind it. I didn't realize his previous work then with
It's interesting how there's some overlap there, because he actually had left Forgen because he didn't see it being that effective in trying to help men heal when it's currently happening to thousands of boys every single day. So, the idea would be to stop the bleeding before you could really address the wound.
And if, just to circle back, is that not what I said very similar to, a few minutes ago, where I said we need to determine, are we going to go the legal route or the ending medical route? Because we don't have the resources to do both.
Hey guys, it's me, Pots. I'm briefly interrupting this interview to let you know about the Pots e-commerce program. It is vital to keeping the Prevail Over the System channel alive. Go and join us on our Discord to learn more. And best of all, it's free to partake in the Pots e-commerce program, and we don't need any of your information whatsoever. This helps us keep the interviews coming along with other Intactivist content to empower, teach, and update Intactivists with very important information, as well as being the voice for the Intactivist public. Thank you all so much. Okay, now back to the interview.
Right. I mean, really, if we could get the hospitals to just stop offering it at all, that would be a huge win. Do you think that there's any way to try to compel hospitals and maybe the medical establishment as a whole to actually stop performing circumcisions, at the very least?
Here's the deal. Okay, what I'm going to say is this. I have a lot of women who will tell me, I abhor everything about circumcision and I don't want it, but we women can't be fighting on an issue that in America really presents itself, 90% of the time as something that impacts male. If you want circumcision to stop, you have to get men themselves to stand up and fight for it. And I agree with that 100%. So for me, I think the best way that we could do it is by putting pressure on doctors to say, we know that you've been enriching yourselves by performing this procedure for over 7 decades at this point. That ends now. I would like us to go ahead and do a hospital watch, if only to be able to say, even if you're someone that's like, well, I see no problem with routine circumcision. Okay, great. Do you have a problem with medical fraud? Because that's what this is.
Right.
I think we can win on that angle. And no doctor is going to be the one to want to go down with a fraud label on their back.
If they have that risk, they're definitely going to be more cautious.
Yeah, exactly. Stop trying to appeal to people's emotions and follow on the logic with this, which is that we are unnecessarily removing otherwise normal body parts off of people. Well, your tax dollars are paying for it if they're low income.
What would you say to someone who is just beginning to reckon with their own circumcision trauma?
I would say, you know what, you're as bad as it is, you are more set up for success than me. Because when I started this, there really was no internet group dedicated to support networks for people undergoing this. There were no books. There was none of that. I had to figure all of this out by myself. And I don't say that to make myself a martyr. I say that as someone who says, you know what? Yeah, it sucks realizing what happened to you without your consent. And it's forever a wedge between yourself and the rest of your family and society. But you know what? With the help of other people, you can get over it, and maybe not over it, but learn to live with it and be able to stop it from happening to the next generation of people. And if you're like me, be able to have the last word in. So if that means something to you, fortunately, I think the intactivist movement is better set up to handle that now than when I started.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely advanced in just 10 years. So you essentially discovered the issue in about 2015. Is that correct?
Yes, and I remember at that time, again, it's not that people back then, when I first started this, were so, oh, yeah, I'm pro-circumcision. It was just more, oh, yeah, I guess it could be bad. I don't know anything about it. No one ever talks to me about it. I'm talking from the standpoint of the average American. Now, 10 years later, like I said, we have the internet. We have the circumcision support groups on Reddit. We have this project here. Everybody seems to be aware of it now to some degree, whereas that was not the case 10 years ago. I won't say favorability, or people appreciating intact anatomy has changed much, but the public awareness of the issue has skyrocketed from what it was before. I can attest to that.
Oh yeah, I could see it too. There's people that they at least acknowledge that it's controversial. So it's like they'll say, hey, don't hate me for this, but I'm planning on doing this. What do you think? Because they're at least acknowledging that it's controversial. Well, I'd say 10 years prior, people would just kind of post about it like it's the most normal thing ever. And they wouldn't even have any kind of consciousness as to people are against it or it's a controversial topic.
Mm-hmm. Unless you happen to know foreigners like I do.
The foreigners that what is their opinions on circumcision? Have you ever discussed this with them?
I have not, because again, a lot of where I'm at geographically located, I basically have Latinos and Somalis. And Somalis, again, are pretty much in favor of circumcision across the board. Or let me rephrase that. They are in favor of genital cutting across the board for both men and women, because again, to them, it's a thing about honor and decency. And this is what an adult is supposed to do, right? There's the cultural aspect with it. Whereas here, if you don't know them, you're just more likely to say, oh, well, every other white kid that, this happens to, okay, just like my dad did. I don't resent my dad. I understand exactly why my dad did what he did. I don't resent him for it because the same thing happened to him. But I did tell him that, you know what, Dad, if I ever father a grandson, this ain't going to happen to him. So if you have an issue with that, speak now or forever hold your peace.
And what did he say to that?
And he was like, okay. He's like, I really don't care one way or another. If you think it's best, you're a smart guy, you go for it.
So when you spoke to your father about it, did he ever apologize to you?
No, but I never asked for that because, like I said, it happened to him. He was pressured into it by the KJ. And again, a whole medical culture at the time in the late 80s and early 90s that was pushing for this. The game was over before he even started. But I did get an apology from my mother.
Oh, you did? How did that go?
Good. Actually, I spoke about it with her, but she actually was like, I'm glad you brought it up because I would have had to find a way to sort of to sort of land the conversation in another way. This was like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. She's like, I watched this BBC documentary about female genital cutting. And she's like, I really want to apologize that I didn't be the more forceful mother that you need to try to override your dad's opinion. Because she's like, I didn't make the connection until I saw this film.
Right. Wow, that must have been really powerful, huh?
It was. And I'd also like to say, it disturbs me the number again, I'm not trying to speak for other people, but I will say it disturbs me the number of comments I see in these circumcision support groups where it's like, well, it's okay to permanently sever ties with your family over this. Why would they do that? Okay, again, culture matters and people do the best with what they can do at the time that they have it. And my parents, who had 2 disabled children, are the perfect example of that.
So you're saying it's important to not necessarily cut ties, but to try to bridge the gap, maybe?
Bridge the gap and say it is not going to happen to any future children of mine.
All right, that's a good way to go about it. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience today that we haven't discussed already?
Yeah, I would just say The only reason that I did what I did for following up with my doctor in the manner that I did was because she was an incompetent bully and deserved not only what I did to her, but she 1,000 times over and more. She should have even gotten worse than what I gave her. Okay, if she had just left it at circumcision and nothing more, I still wouldn't be proud of it. I would still have probably followed up with a letter. But if she had been an otherwise competent doctor and I didn't have to be proven right by another person suffering at her hands, I probably would have left it alone. But what I would like to say is to the audience going forward, what I did, the Overton window may shift in another 10 years. And what I'd like to say now is that doctors who still push for them may or may not end up getting packages of love like what I sent, just for circumcision alone.
Right. I'd imagine with time, it's honestly, it's just going to get more tense, and things like that is probably going to happen more often.
Because people can no longer justify it. The medical establishment can no longer justify it. And like I said, I think for a lot of people who are even considering it, the fact that half of all US states don't even allow it if you're on the state health program because it's an elective procedure, that should tell you everything you know. You don't just have to listen to what your doctor says anymore. And for the record, too, just because this one doctor happened to be Lucifer incarnate does not mean that I have any sort of resentment against the medical industry. I'm donating my body to science when my time comes. I think we need to respect medical professionals, and more of them are talking about this every day. I think that's fantastic. I just need more of them to do that.
This whole situation hasn't really changed your faith in the medical establishment at all?
No, because how could I? I mean, I had another doctor in the United States who, as soon as he realized that my sister needed the extensive specialized care that she did, he went ahead and did it pro bono for 1.5 years because the issue meant that much to him.
Wow. Yeah, that's really...
D after their initials is not a guarantee that they're a good person, but it doesn't mean that I think they have to be a bad person either.
Right. Well, thank you for joining me today on this interview, and it's going to be published. And if there's any little final thoughts that you have, please share them now. I'd appreciate it.
Sure. No. Well, other than that, let me just ask you this: what did you think of my package of love?
Oh yeah, I took a look at it. That is really thorough. I thought adding the comic was a nice touch. And the only thing I just wish we could have seen her reaction.
I know. That is the one thing that I will never be able to have, but obtain from that. But you know what? I have the tracking number that says it was delivered and she signed for it. So even if she threw it in the trash right after, she opened it, the fact of the matter is that I got the last word in. And I would suggest that if other American men like myself, if that's important to them, they're more than welcome to go ahead and do what I did.
I do find it interesting when people such as yourself actually do have a story where you were able to contact them, and you might not have been able to speak with her directly, but you did at least get to send her this package and stuff like that.
Yeah, and her professional reputation is ruined. And and here's the deal: this is a really, please don't include this in the film, but I will tell you personally, man to man,
it's a psychological stain, and it just stays with you forever. I mean, even if Origin succeeds in being able to regenerate the foreskin, it doesn't heal the psychological wounds that torturing a baby in the first few days of life like this must have on them,
Absolutely.
Okay, that was Jason's final part 2 interview. Let me know if you have any thoughts or questions down in the comments below. I'm going to put all of Jason's links down in the description. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our other Intactivist content that we release every single week. Please share and like this video to get this out to more people. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Bye.
Reboot the mission. No fear, no fiction. Truth in transmission. Prevail over the system. Our vision's the difference.